According to the Russian intelligence service, the Russian general who was in charge of organizing the new shipment of military equipment and ammunition to be sent from Crimea to the borders of Ukraine was assassinated by pro-Ukrainian insurgents operating within Russian territory. The Russian general was appointed by Vladimir Putin. 8 people raided the home of the Russian commander and used automatic rifles to take him out. Interesting news is still coming out of the back, much where the war is really hot. The Russian army responded but chose to move backward as their next target after successfully capturing the city of Soledar. For Vladimir Putin, a city with many subsurface resources is a crucial area. Putin's aim for the city, though, is motivated by a totally different purpose. If the city of Bach, which is widely regarded as the hub of the Donetsk region, is taken, this city will be used as the Russian army's coordination headquarters and a sizable command center will be built for the Russian army. Vladimir Putin's patience has run thin, though, as the Russian army has been unable to take back one for months. Putin, who now wants to take back a lot, made the decision to deploy a senior official who was a member of the Russian armed forces to the Crimean Peninsula. The Kremlin, however, claimed that they chose to protect the general's safety by keeping his identity a secret. The Ukrainian government took efforts to learn more about this general's identity and the reason behind his dispatch. It was discovered thanks to the diligent work of Ukrainian and American intelligence that Vladimir Putin would execute one of the biggest military shipments he had ever planned, and that Putin wanted a top military official to be in command of the shipment. Vladimir Putin assigned Dmitry Lazinsky, a general whose name is frequently used in Russia, to this task. Before he realized the shipment, the Russian general, whom Putin had sent, was discovered to be on his own. Here are the news specifics. The Russian army continues to sustain significantly higher losses every day, despite its inability to take the city of Bach for months. Putin has lost all patience after the Russian army's recent assault on the city of Bakhmut resulted in the deaths of more than 1,400 servicemen. When Ukrainian officials reported that the Russian army was losing more than 500 soldiers every day on the rearward front, Vladimir Putin acted the majority of the forces, according to Eric Gerasimov, chief of the general staff, were maintained in readiness, notwithstanding the partial mobilization decision sent off across the Kurs Bridge to Crimea. Estimates placed the total number of these soldiers at over 20,000. Vladimir Putin personally picked Dmitry Lazinsky to lead this military operation. 2 distinct methods were to be used to deliver the shipment. Russian soldiers were sent in the first shipment, while weapons and equipment were sent in the second batch. Both of these supplies were successfully delivered to Crimea by Dmitry Lazinsky. All that remained was for him to travel to Crimea, take authority there, and successfully transport these shipments to Ukrainian territory. The Russian general Ventos spends the night at home in Stavropol after receiving the first shipment. Our Russian officials were not aware that the package was known to Ukrainian intelligence. Russian General Dmitry Lazinsky was to be neutralized, according to Ukrainian intelligence agents, but he was still inside Russian territory. Ukrainian intelligence agents have gotten in touch with pro-Ukrainian resistance groups present within Russian territory and asked them to neutralize the Russian general. With the assistance of the United States, Ukraine was able to find the home of the Russian general and let the Ukrainian resistance groups know where he was. The head of the Ukrainian rebel group then devised a comprehensive strategy to defeat the Russian commander. Saint cameras captured every frame of the assassination that was planned by the Ukrainian resistance. However, this footage's broadcast was swiftly outlawed by the Russian authorities. The opposition leader assembled a group of 8 warriors with specialized training late at night. This group assembled and they quickly surrounded the residence of the Russian general. As soon as the house's lights were out, the resistance warriors began to move toward it, broke down the door, and quickly entered. Only 2 minutes had passed after the rebels were inside the home when they used automatic weapons to take out Russian General Dmitry Lazinsky in his own room. Within 3 minutes, The assassinated insurgent fighters fled the scene in the company of a black man never to be seen or heard from again. The security personnel were warned by the locals, but it was too late to identify the assassin. Russian Special Forces troops were sent to the area by Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu. The Russian government chose to close the investigation after several days of fighting in order to conceal the general's murder. The Russian government went into a deep quiet after refusing to say who planned the assassination. Days later, the pro-Egyptian resistance groups that had planned the killing released a statement. They claimed that one of the high ranks of the Russian armed forces was neutralized by the pro-Ukrainian resistance groups. In a statement posted to their social media pages a week ago, this declaration became the goal for all of Russia. Russians quickly took to the streets to demonstrate against Vladimir Putin, stating that he was unable to provide security for Russia. However, many more serious issues resulted from this murder. Under the direction of Dmitry Lysitsky, the soldiers and munitions that Russian President Vladimir Putin had dispatched to Crimea remained there. The Russian military in Ukraine needed to receive these troops and equipment as soon as possible. Vladimir Putin, however, chose to delay the shipment after the assassination because he believed that the Ukrainian government was aware of it. As a result, the Russian army's intended invasion on Bakhmut was also delayed. The fact that a senior member of the Russian military was so quickly and readily neutralized has greatly alarmed the Kremlin. The confidence in Vladimir Putin has been severely undermined by how easily pro-Ukrainian insurgents have been able to maneuver across Russia's borders. General Dmitry Lysitsky's murder was attributed to Vladimir Putin by representatives of the Russian opposition. The majority of Ukrainian nationals from the seized regions of Ukraine were forcibly taken to Russia and made to live there, as is widely known by a larger Putin. Putin continues to force Ukrainian citizens to live in Russia by awarding them Russian passports. He has dispatched authorities to the occupied territory in his parliamentary speech. Putin's opponents raised the issue and began to claim that the Russian leader was becoming cynical and making poor decisions. Moreover, the Putin administration needs to end. One of the most vocal critics of Putin, whose name is frequently heard in Russia, made some statements from his cell. The lone opponent to Vladimir Putin was considered to be Alexei Navalny, who Putin views as a threat. Putin, though, was able to get rid of Navalny. Navalny stated so in a statement made from behind bars. Putin's totalitarian system must stop, and the Russian people are the only ones who can achieve this. The Russian people should not allow Vladimir Putin to ignore these bad policies, and they should urge the Russian people to protest in the streets. The cause is Vladimir Putin has been extremely frustrated by protests occurring inside Russian territory. Ukraine has begun to attack the Russian army's major funding sources. Iran has begun to target crucial areas within Russia's borders, such as natural gas and oil installations. Gas pipelines to Germany have been interrupted multiple times by Putin, who frequently threatens to cut off natural gas to Western nations. However, when the natural gas weapon in Vladimir Putin's arsenal ceased to be effective, natural gas exports were required to support the Russian military. He was unable to come up with any new threats to lift the embargoes and sanctions against Russia. The Ukrainian army's counter-offensive is still moving forward at top pace. We can see that the Ukrainian army is making progress in several areas based on the most recent reports from the front lines. Russia is engaged in its most difficult conflict ever. The Ukrainian army is still conducting its national offensive operations in at least 4 frontline regions, according to the most recent reports. Let's get started with the map analysis report, where we examine the most recent frontline developments, as reported by the Pioneer. You can subscribe to our channel and enable notifications to ensure that you don't miss any in-depth map analysis or recent news on the Russia-Ukraine border. By utilizing the super thanks, you can also help the team who prepared this work. Let's begin today's map report. At the bottom in the area to the north of the city of Bakhmut, The Ukrainian army's plan to encircle Bakhmut is well underway. The Russian army is suffering significant losses as Ukrainian forces apply tremendous pressure to Bakhmut's flanks. The Ukrainian army should not advance on Bakhmut's flanks, according to the Russian army. But at the time, this is not feasible. The Russian army recently began an operation in the vicinity of Zelensky, where the Ukrainian army has stepped up its strikes. The region to the west of Zelensky that you can see on the map is shown in blue since it was liberated during the control offensive. The Russian military reportedly launches an offensive here without regard to gender. According to the most recent reports from the area, in an effort to eliminate Ukrainian positions in the area, Russian troops were forced to retire while suffering significant casualties. The advancements in this area will have a significant impact on Bakhmut's future, as you are aware. Ukrainian forces must conquer Yakhini and Breka in order to complete the encirclement of Bakhmut. The distance between Breka and Yakhini, which we just described, is roughly 10 kilometers. Russia must therefore continue to rule in the area of Breka and Yardny. However, it does not appear that Russian forces will be able to hold their positions in Bakhmut city center for an extended period of time. Russian and Ukrainian forces are still engaged in combat. Furious confrontations are still going on around the city center. According to the most recent reports from the 2nd Assault Company of the 24th Ukrainian Battalion and the 2nd Battalion in the area. The company's most recent reports state that Ukrainian military have completed the last phase of their strategy to take the city. Although the division distributes daily updates about events in the area on its Telegram channel, it follows a rule of absolute secrecy to guarantee the operation's success. However, some local sources make unworthy assertions. According to the most recent reports, the Ukrainian troops heading into the bombed city center have advanced in Kilishchivka, the region connected to the southern stage of Bakhmut, by around 750 meters. As can be seen, the advance has gone beyond 1,000 meters. Additionally, Kilishchivka-related news from Russian sources is unfavorable for Russia. The most recent information from Russian sources indicate that the degree of violence in Kulishchivka has reached exceptional proportions. According to reports, the local conflicts have already moved into nearby homes. A further astounding assertion has been made by the local Ukrainian organization Barm and Demons. Ukrainian army have reportedly already infiltrated Kulikivka. According to the most recent allegations of the Barm Demons group, who described the ongoing conflict as a cleansing. According to the group, the Ukrainian flag will soon be flying in the heart of the city. Farther south in the direction of Artemivka, the onslaught by the Asian army is unrelenting. According to the most recent information released to the public by Hanna Malia, a spokesperson for the Ukrainian Defense Ministry, Ukrainian troops have advanced around 1,000 meters in the direction of Kirtamuka. It is possible to predict that the area will soon come under Ukrainian control if the Ukrainian army do not slow down the area. Let's examine the most recent changes on the front lines in Zaporizhia. As you are aware, Ukrainian forces have just begun a fierce onslaught in Ravnopol's direction. The Ukrainian army was able to maintain its positions close to Ravnopol. According to the most recent reports, local sources assert that there have been multiple battles in the region and significant casualties have been sustained by Russian forces. Additionally, Ukrainian forces are moving forward in the south of the area's loading region areas. In addition, there have been some truly astounding advances behind this Zaporizhia front line, as you are aware. Strikes targeted at demolishing the Russian fortifications behind the front line are crucial to the Ukrainian army's offensive plan in the area. The Melitopol and Tokmak regions, which are strategically significant and among the nearest large cities to the front, are visible when we look behind this Zaporizhia front line. Recent sources state that the attacks by the Ukrainian army have caused multiple explosions in the area. The location of the explosions are not clearly known, but prior Ukrainian strikes have been suggested. We may say that the majority of these explosions occurred at recent Asian military installations, supply lines, or depots. In actuality, Berdyansk and Mariupol are the main targets of the counter-onslaught on the Perata front line. The Ukrainian army is attempting to breach Russian defenses in this manner. The most recent reports indicate that frontline Ukrainian troops are now 1.5 kilometers closer to the bastions. This represents the latest advancement in the separation. We can, however, say that the freedom of Guardians will take a little longer time. Polihi, which is seen as being on the Prussia front line, has reportedly also experienced significant changes. Recent reports from local sources indicate that Ukrainian artillery is heavily defending the city of Polihi. The railroad tracks in Polihi that serve as a supply route for Russian soldiers engaged in combat on the front line north of Polihi are reportedly protected by Ukrainian heavy artillery. According to the most recent sources, the artillery strikes were followed by the explosion of an information depot in the vicinity that contained a significant amount of ammunition. In the ensuing days, the mission facing Russian soldiers in Polihi North would get more challenging. You are aware of how crucial Donetsk is to Ukraine. We own this city, which has a rich cultural history. The situation does, however, have some undertones of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Recently, the Ukrainian army has applied further pressure to the city of Donetsk with its extensive wartime experience. The Ukrainian artillery is conducting successful missions. The most recent information we have from the area indicates that Ukrainian artillery struck and destroyed a Russian military site north of Donetsk. According to reports, this strike had a significant impact on the Russian presence stations at the site. The Ukrainian army's control offensive appears to be pretty successful thus far. As we said in our report, we believe it is possible to predict that more Ukrainian land will soon be freed from Russian rule. How do you feel? Do you believe the control offensive by the Ukrainian army is working bombed? Will Russia lose him? What further developments can you foresee on the Zaporizhzhia front line? We respect your viewpoint. Long-term plans and strategies are the most crucial tools for success in a conflict. The failure of the Russian army's efforts to quickly invade all of Ukraine also serves as evidence for this claim. We have witnessed the Ukrainian army's steadfast resistance since the start of the conflict, which is based on a long-term and carefully thought-out strategy. The Ukrainian army appears to be approaching this plan's conclusion. This assertion is supported by remarks made by the Ukrainian General Staff. The Ukrainian General Staff posted the following words along with a video of the Ukrainian Special Forces. "It's time to reclaim what is rightfully ours." The implication of this comment is that the Ukrainian counterattack might begin at any time. One could argue that the relative quiet on the front lines over the last 2 days is a result of the last-minute preparations for the counter-onslaught. Further evidence that the counterattack is imminent comes from changes in Russian army targeting. Farther from the front line, let's look at the most recent changes to the map. In order to stay up to date on all the developments as the Ukrainian counteroffensive starts, subscribe to our channel and enable notifications by selecting the join button. You may also view unique frontline video. Let's move on to our map analysis now. The frontline battles continue to be centered on the city of bombed Wagner forces. On the bombed fronts, frontline have reportedly begun to withdraw. According to the most recent reports from local sources, Ukrainian special forces started assuming their positions to the west of bombed as Wagner started to retreat. We are aware that Wagner's retreat will leave a void that the Russian troops will be unable to fill. Therefore, the Russian army is attempting to make up for the manpower shortage with additional weaponry. A formidable defense and blocking line has been constructed by the Ukrainian army. Thanks to its control of the flags, which may have temporarily halted this operation. Just to the northeast of the Breka district, you can see the E40 highway. Through this road, the Russian troops delivered supplies to the bombed city center and neighboring neighborhoods. At the appropriate time, the Ukrainian army was pursuing them. The Ukrainian forces gathered in Pachuca's northwest. The Russian supply convoys are attacked by 4 columns of Ukrainian soldiers. The first and second columns attacked in northwesterly and westerly directions from Pruvalar and Orahovo, and the third and fourth columns attacked in westerly ways from the center and north of Kakhovka. The Russian army suffered significant casualties and attenuation as a result of the Ukrainian actions. It appears that the Russian army will experience the domino effect that we have already mentioned as a result of Wagner's departure. With Wagner's departure, the Russian presence in Bar-Made support column, we anticipate a swift change in the map. The region is still experiencing intense battles between Russian and Ukrainian forces. Let's move on from Bakhmut and concentrate on Mariupol and the Berians. In our latest reports, this area has emerged as one of the most frequently mentioned locations. It appears that the scenario will last for some time. These 2 cities are placed in an area where the explosions do not want to depart. You may see Nikolsky in this line, which is to the northwest of Mariupol. This location is situated adjacent to a crucial roadway. This is where the most of the Mariupol explosions were. According to the most recent reports, according to numerous local sources, the Russian military has recently been preparing for a new cargo via this route. Therefore, it is claimed that sabotage organizations are responsible for the explosions in the regions, with Bryansk serving as their main point of focus. The explosions in Bryansk are also noteworthy because of their position. You are aware that there have been numerous explosions recently in the city of Bryansk. The city's military base was the site of the most recent blast. The Ukrainian sabotage organizations allegedly placed an improvised explosive device in this area on a fuel tanker. The fuel tankers detonated with a powerful noise when the explosives were set off, spreading fear across the area. A response from Russia regarding the explosion in the area is still pending. The front line has recently called me, as we indicated at the outset of our article. Cities near Russia's border are typically where activity is most. The consequences of the cross-border operation to Belgrade have not yet been fully resolved, and neither has the tension in the area. This tension persisted as a result of the explosions in the area. The cross-border operation did not include Ukrainian army units directly. Local sources claim that the Ukrainian forces have begun a light artillery fire in the area. This information hasn't been verified yet, though. Gerlovka and Shebekino and Belgrade are the main areas where explosions occur. Gunfire will occasionally accompany these blasts. Many observers think that Russian separatists are responsible for setting up this volatile situation. You may recall that Russian separatist organizations have endorsed a cross-border operation in the Belgrade region. There have been 2 major explosions. The Interior Ministry building in the heart of the city is one of them. The thermal power plant is the other. Who owned the uninvented aerial vehicle is still unknown. The kamikaze drones were used in these strikes. It appears more likely, though, that his assaults were carried out by the Ukrainian army. The Russian authorities did not issue a statement on casualties. An attack on another Russian was carried out by an unmanned aerial vehicle victory that can lead to a serious incident. Sources claim that a moving vehicle owned by the Russian Defense Ministry was struck by kamikaze drones. 2 senior Russian officials were riding in the car that was blown up when the drone struck. According to Ukrainian authorities, both servicemen were slain. Local sources also concur with Ukraine. Russia, on the other hand, would rather keep quiet about the matter. When we speculated that Russian separatists would have stepped up their operations in Belgrade, we pointed out that this might prompt anti-Putin and anti-war Russians living in other parts of Russia to organize. Let's now head north on the actual conflict map. The location is roughly 455 kilometers from the border with Ukraine. Moscow, the capital of Russia, is located 500 kilometers from northern Ukraine. The location of some quite peculiar events was the city to kamikaze unmanned aerial vehicles recently struck a city fuel tank. This city is situated where three rivers have an impact regarding the likelihood of fuel seeping from the fuel tank into the water supply. Russian authorities have differing opinions. Given the distance, it is quite unlikely that the Ukrainian army carried out this offensive. However, it seems more sense to consider the current increase in activity on Russian soil as a product of Russian separatists. Post a comment to share your viewpoint with the world. Many of an army's needs in battle are met by tanks, the mounted knights of modern warfare. With their firepower, they can occasionally overpower hostile positions. Alternatively, they can act as a base of operations for troops. Tanks are one of the most crucial components of the Russian-Ukrainian war, and they directly affect what happens on the battlefield. At several points, Ukrainian army soldiers have completely destroyed Russian tanks and continue to do so. Particularly, Russian tanks are suffering significant casualties as a result of the battle in the Donetsk region. We have frequently mentioned the significant tank losses incurred by the Russian army or the Russian tank. In our earlier updates on the combat in Donetsk, called as Bunny has a lot to do with Donetsk turning into a cemetery for tanks. Let's talk about this situation. Russia and the Ukrainian army are engaged in a protracted battle of attrition. Tanks and armored units are the most crucial objectives in this war of attrition. The Ukrainian army is aiming its tanks against the Russian tanks that have been deployed to the front lines. Numerous Russian tanks were destroyed, particularly in the city of Donetsk. Only one tank is present. The narrative is incredibly captivating. The media worldwide publicized the story of this tank, and the Russian press was extremely angry about it. The fact that Russian soldiers fled while leaving the army's tank behind was viewed as a major humiliation. The intriguing frontline incident involving a young software developer named Alex during the first month of the conflict was on the agenda. Alex was a volunteer sniper for the Ukrainian army when the incident occurred, when it was in use. Kharkiv was under occupation. A Russian army TB tank that was abandoned and intact was discovered by Alex. The Russian troops was unable to take the tank with them when they left the city of Kharkiv. They presented it as a gift to the Ukrainian army rather than destroying it. Ukrainian soldiers would now fight the Russian army using the upgraded TADBR tank that had been abandoned. The TAD tanks, which are still in use by the Russian army, are these tanks foreigners in 2018. The TAD BVM-type tanks were put into operation that puts the battle 2 years away due to their maneuverability and combat effectiveness. These Russian army tanks garnered attention. In other words, this cutting-edge weapon was created by the Russian army for Ukraine to deploy on a mountainside. Alex came across this tank. Alex debated whether or not to approach the tank when he first spotted it, but he eventually found the bravery. He secured the perimeter before moving cautiously and gently toward the tank. The idea of leaving the tank unattended didn't make sense. He opened the lid and peered inside while standing atop the tank. Nobody was present inside. Out of panic, the Russian soldiers fled from the tank. The tank was taken by Alex, who then brought it back to his office. He examined the tank with Ukrainian engineers. The Ukrainian flags of yellow and blue were installed in lieu of the Russian insignia on the tank, and the tank was given a name, Buddy. Buddy worked for a long time under Alex's direction. Here is how Alex summarized his time spent with Buddy. My particular tank is Bunny. I command a tank and own a tank. This upgraded tank is more technologically sophisticated, has an automatic loading, and can shoot better munitions, including guided missiles. Bunny and I had wonderful outings together, and he ended up being my traveling companion. Indeed, the Ukrainian army conducted numerous successful actions, while Bunny, the tank, and Alex were in service in the first month after his capture. Bunny 2 tank damaged close to a dozen Russian tanks and armored vehicles. Since then, Bunny has been making life difficult for the Russian forces, but it was now time for Bunny to tank out. Bunny was told to go to Bar Mate in Donetsk, the scene of severe fighting after Kharkiv was liberated. The loss of Russian armored vehicles in Donetsk was significantly increased by Bunny, which served in Bakhmut until it was retired. Food until it. During an operation, an anti-tank mine damaged the tank. It was later fixed and brought back to the front lines. However, it became apparent recently that it could no longer perform its duty, and the Ukrainian army made the crucial choice. Being taken prisoner is considered an embarrassing circumstance in the military culture. Many troops take the initiative and beg their friends to kill them rather than being caught in the military tradition. This is seen as an honorable demise. Tank Bunny was dispatched to an honorable end like a soldier. Buddy the tank and the Donets sustained severe damage that was irreparable. Alex included. Everyone associated with Tank Bunny came to a conclusion regarding the tank's destiny. It has the option of destroying it or leaving it there. The Ukrainian soldiers bid Tank Bunny farewell after realizing how dangerous the initial choice was. The crew of the tank set it ablaze while battling the Russian forces. Tank Bunny has finished his assignment in the Donetsk countryside. The Russian army is losing a lot of ammunition and vehicles for Russia. The number of tanks and armored vehicles destroyed in Donetsk had gotten out of hand. As a result, Donetsk has been compared to a cemetery by Russian bloggers. The Ukrainian army is bolstering its arsenal in preparation for the next spring onslaught, but it is also attempting to carve out a niche for itself by conducting decisive assaults against the Russian army's weaponry. The benefits of tanks on the front line were discussed at the outset of our report. The repeated losses suffered by the Russian army's armored formations demonstrate the success of Ukraine's approach. Russian tanks are protected from being damaged by anti-tank mines. On the Donetsk side, Russian tanks are unable to advance because of the traps mentioned at numerous sites. Another Russian tank was recently smashed by a Ukrainian army. Anti-tank mine includes the 110th Mechanized Brigade of Ukraine. One of the emblematic groups of the Donetsk uprising is still shooting down Russian tanks. The 110th Mechanized Brigade used 40 x-53mm head bombs modified to be launched from a commercial draw to destroy a Russian armored vehicle in Donetsk. The Russian economy cannot support the continued losses the Russian army has sustained on the front lines. The sanctions affected Russian economy, which is floundering. It is highly challenging to make up for the Russian army's losses. With the most recent actions, the information on Russian army losses is listed below. 15 military troops, 3,646 tanks, 7,043 armored combat vehicles, 2,770 artillery systems, 535 reactive spread fire systems, 282 air defense systems, and 307 aircraft comprise the 180,050 military personnel. The Pioneer team is still reporting on the Russian-Ukrainian combat with regards to 293 helicopters, 5,630 automobile and tank equipment, 18 military ships and boats, 911 cruise missiles, 2,334 unmanned aerial vehicles, 319 special machines. And for operating tactical missile systems, bringing you correct information is our top priority in this work. Teams are diligently pursuing this objective in order to continue our effort.